5 o'clock on the dot. Here we go. Good evening. It's great to see everybody here tonight for this town hall. I want to welcome you here to the City of Hopkinsville City Council chambers. I would like to first give a thank you to Mayor Knight, his staff here at City Council for hosting this. This is an important part of the democratic process. I want to give a special thank you to Senator Craig Richardson and Representatives Myron, Dossett, and Walker Thomas for joining us this evening. I know that you guys are very, very busy. I was just joking with Craig, so you're about to be burning up the road here. You better enjoy the holidays. He said, I'm already burning it up now. So I know that it doesn't stop. Session happens just for a short time of the year, but y'all's work continues throughout it. So I really appreciate you meeting with the constituents this evening. Speaking of constituents, I'd also like to give a very special thank you for everyone who's here in attendance. This is a part of us having a functional democracy, is coming together and talking about the issues and seeing where everybody stands and working through the issues to bring our Commonwealth forward, and as well as our community, Christian County, and Hopkinsville as well. So thank you very much this evening. I think I know just about everybody in this room, but if I don't, my name is Cody Knopfsinger. I'm a native from Christian County and returned home in 2011 after graduating from the University of Kentucky with my wife, Melanie. I currently serve as controller of Hopkinsville Electric System and serve in a variety of civic roles throughout the community. So I am honored this evening to MC this town hall and take you on this journey. My job is to be a nonpartisan facilitator to make sure that we all have equal time to speak. Our guests here this evening talk about the issues and give you guys some time for some response here. So as we get started, I think the format that we'll kind of go with is I'll start off with a few questions that I've got written down here and let each of you answer it. Please keep your responses to a few minutes or so. We want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to be able to talk about the issues. I know that a lot of these things are nuanced and you can get really deep in the weeds on it, but we want to cover a lot of ground here and cover a variety of the things that are on the top of mind with the citizens of Hopkinsville and Christian County. After about a few questions, then we will open up the floor to all of you to ask your questions. So please do not be shy. We want you to be a part of this process. I brought my coffee. This is a conversation, right? So we're going to have a good time this evening. I do want to note that this is being recorded currently at the moment, and it will be on the City of Hopkinsville's podcast. It'll be released later. So let's be lively so everybody can hear a great crowd. But remember, you're being recorded. So what you say, somebody can go back and listen to it later, so you don't want to be embarrassed. Without further ado, let's get this show on the road. I do want to note that we'll be here for a little bit this evening, but I know the Cats are tipping off at 6 o'clock against Georgetown. So I know some of you are going to be looking at your phone around then. We'll go probably a little bit past that so you guys can get home and start that over, especially if you're streaming, right? So let's kind of start off the evening and kind of recap the last year. Let's kind of talk about some of the highlights, some of the work that you all were doing at the General Assembly, some of the things that you feel like are your wins and quite possibly your losses, and if you can particularly frame your answer around how that affects the citizens here of Hopkinsville. Walker, I'm looking at you first, and I'll let you take the floor, and we'll go with it.
Well, thank you, Cody. I appreciate everyone being here. Last year was our short session, so we were only up there 30 days, so we didn't do as much damage as we can do in a 60-day session, which is coming up next year. But the 60-day sessions, of course, we do the budget. And one of the exciting things that came out last year is we were able to drop the income tax down another 0.5 percentage point, starting January of 26. So instead of 4%, we're down to 3.5%. And that really, we feel like if we can get it closer to, we'd love to get it to zero, but at least for every tick that it goes down, that really helps our employees. It helps drive people to work in our community, and so that was awfully exciting. I joke, there's one that's a bill that we passed that is not getting a lot of attention, but we have the 10 Commandments that is out there in front of the the Eagles Club, and we passed a bill that can actually come back to the Capitol. And so we're working on trying to get the 10 Commandments that was given back in 1971 back up to the Capitol. And but I just see the press's headline saying, Walker Thomas votes to take the 10 Commandments out of Hoptown. And it's like, that's not the case. But so those are just some of the things. We'll be talking about them, I'm sure, as time goes on.
Thank you there, Walker, and I too want to thank you very much for being here. Before I begin, Representative Jason Petrie, I spoke with him the other day. He wanted to send his apologies for not being able to be with us tonight. Jason shares part of Christian County there within the House with Walker and myself. And as Chair of Appropriations and Revenue, he has been extremely busy. And I couldn't think of a finer gentleman to serve with and to have the opportunity to get to know him. But I did want to let you know why he wasn't here. As Walker mentioned, the lowering of the state income tax is something I'm very proud of that we have been working on since 2017. When I first ran for, Lord, I don't know how I've been here for as long as I have serving in Frankfort. January 1st will start my 20th year representing the 9th District. But I have always believed in my heart the best way to encourage economic development, to encourage people to want to locate and live here in Kentucky, because our population is stagnant. We have no further than to go back and look that in 1970, our population in Hopkinsville was a little bit larger than Clarksville. I think we were at about 21,000. Clarksville was at about 19. Clarksville today is the 4th largest city in the state of Tennessee. Hopkinsville, we have grown to, I think we're currently 30,000, which impacts all of the citizens here in Christian County, because this stagnant growth goes across the entire Commonwealth. We know we've got to look at things that we can do to encourage people to want to choose Kentucky as their residence, as their place to live. We know we have an issue with homes. A lot of that comes back to regulations that are in place and things that we can do to help lower the cost of infrastructure to encourage people to want to build homes, because that's going to be one of the primary goals that we can do. I own rental property, but I'd much rather see people owning their homes rather than renting. So that's going to be something we'll work on. For myself, this is my first full year as serving as chair of the Agriculture Committee. And I'm very honored that leadership saw fit to place me in that position. And right now, I think the key bill that I'm going to be working on coming out of Ag deals with eminent domain, property owner rights. So many times we see things happen across this state in which property owners aren't treated fairly. No one that I've ever spoken to that has these issues with eminent domain have ever said their goal was to stop progress. They just want to be treated fairly because they were the ones who made that initial investment in their property. So that's going to be something that we're working on. Also, agricultural industrial development. You're going to be seeing additional dollars go into the Department of Agriculture, Kentucky's Department of Agriculture, rather than into economic development there within Frankfort. With that being said, the goal is to actually look and recruit things dealing with agriculture, and there's no one that has a better knowledge than those individuals there in the Department of Agriculture. It is our bread and butter for West Kentucky. If I'm correct, agriculture represents about $60 billion in revenue across the board for Kentucky. We're looking, and I pulled these numbers last week, and I would dare say I had for Fayette County, it's about $2.5 billion. I'm pretty sure that if you look at Christian County, we're pushing $1 billion that agriculture impacts. That's not just farmers riding on tractors across the field. That's any type of business that is involved in agriculture. And it's something that I'm encouraging. I've got a granddaughter that's 13 going on 21, and I have encouraged her to look. We're blessed that we live in Pembroke. Philip, you understand, we're blessed where we live at. But I've encouraged her just as Squire Peterson has encouraged his daughters. Our goal is for those young people to know there are opportunities there to go in. Once they finish college, there are opportunities dealing with agriculture outside of just riding on a tractor. We want them to know that this is a place they can come back home to. We want all of our young people to know, come back here, create a home. This is where we want you to raise your children. This is where we've decided to live and raise our children. So we want to encourage that growth here in Kentucky.
Thank you, Representative Dossett. Senator Richardson, you're the less seasoned of the three that are up here right now. Kind of share. I do see the gray starting to poke through pretty good. Can you share with us how it's kind of your experience has been and some of the things you've worked on as you've been settling into your role?
Well, I first have to give a compliment to both Representative Thomas and Representative Dossett. They've been, I don't know if there's an accurate description on how to describe how helpful they've been in not only mentoring me, but answering questions and just being available. That was one of my biggest surprises in going to Frankfurt was this isn't DC. Even though there may be issues that we disagree on, everyone is willing to talk to everybody and even help everybody. And so these two gentlemen have been incredibly willing and loving in that help and that guidance and that information. And so I can't say thank you enough to both of you for that.
He has to say that about me because I ran with him in Frankfurt.
That's right.
I could lock him in his room.
That's right.
Or not pay my share of the rent. So
That's right.
Keep on bragging.
There you go. To go back and answer your question, Cody, so a couple of the wins that I saw this year and things that I worked on, specifically one of our big wins that sort of goes under the radar because it was complex and is House Bill 695, and what it was a pretty large Medicaid bill. And the reason that we did that bill, sort of before we really knew what the Big Beautiful Bill would do. Now, one advantage we have with what those that were working on the Big Beautiful Bill at the federal level was Representative Guthrie, kind of the chairman of that committee that was really pushing those things through the House, is right here in Kentucky and was more than willing on several occasions to get us on the phone, to get us on Zoom calls, and to talk through so that we could be very prepared of what it would look like. Now, we weren't so prepared for what the Senate was going to do, but what the House bill was going to do, we were certainly prepared for. And so what House Bill 695 did is it created an opportunity for us to look at our Medicaid structure between the payers, the providers, and the participants all together, and how we could narrow the focus as much as possible so that the program operated as it was intended to, and that the outcomes for patients were the best they possibly could. I say that in parentheses, with a government-run program. I am proud of what we've done. I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done on that. There's a committee that was set up that we meet every month, and we're going to be seeing a lot of Medicaid-related bills coming out of that. I don't have any specific that I'm going to be filing, but there are some that are going to be filing some Medicaid bills. So I think that program is working the way it was intended to, and we'll continue to see what those results are. Staying on that same thing of health care, for me, a loss, I think, was 340B. And what that is simply the pharmaceutical companies set up a program that hospitals can buy drugs at certain rates, and that cost saving between that rate can be used. I'm not going to look at my wife so that she doesn't correct me and give me any dirty looks, because she knows the program in and out. But those cost savings can be returned back to the hospital. Cancer, specifically, not just among hospitals in Kentucky, but all across the country, cancer is probably the number one benefactor in how those funds are being used to reduce costs, if not make them $0 for certain drugs that are administered for cancer patients throughout hospitals. We didn't get a bill passed that would have made the discounts in Kentucky as fair as other states. But I'm going to be bringing back that legislation this year, and we're going to take it a little bit of a different direction with a different approach, and just see if somebody new can add a different flavor to that. So I think for me personally, one of our biggest wins was sort of wrapping our arms around a Medicaid program that had sort of gotten away from what its intent was. But a loss for me was not allowing those hospitals to have the fair discounts that they deserve. But we're not done with that fight yet.
Thank you so much for that response. You know, so you guys kind of touched on this in your response to that question, and I wanted to ask, you know, so we're coming up into a budget session. You know, Walker talked about we just got to have a short session, so we're in an even year here, which is going to be pretty busy. Let's stay away from House Bill 1 for a second. We'll get to that here in a little bit. You guys touched about some things that you are working on, but maybe just kind of tell me what one or two of the highest priorities outside of House Bill 1 that may fold into the budget, right, discussions that you think that the legislature General Assembly is going to be working on.
You know, it's funny as I sit here, when we all become state reps or a senator or so, it's amazing that all of a sudden you have to know a little bit about every subject that can come across the state of Kentucky. But then somehow or another, you seem to get channeled into different focuses. And for me, you know, at the time, I represented all the soldiers of Fort Campbell. Myron does now. But that was a natural fit for me to be chair so long for VMAP. And then, of course, agriculture. We're sitting in the agriculture center of the universe here, and it fits so well for Myron. But Craig has come on so long. His specialty seems to be with the medical field, the Medicare, and we're starting to turn to you and on some of these issues. And that's so you know, great that we have different individuals that we can turn to for specific subjects, because when these bills, there'll be, 1,200 bills probably filed this year. That's a lot of information to take in, and we have to turn to experts. I'm going to turn to Craig if it's something along that line, and Myron if it's agriculture related. And so that really does help. I'm sorry, I was thinking of saying that for a while. So the question was kind of some of the big topics. You know, these forums are great, and questionnaires, there are some in the back, so I encourage anyone for myself to send me a questionnaire. We get our bill requests and everything from the constituents. We truly are your representative. And for me, I represent 3 counties, so it's kind of like Craig over here. We share a couple counties but we all have 3 different superintendents, 3 different fiscal courts and county judges, and so it brings different light, but it does bring a lot of needs and stuff. So I've had Cody Young reach out and tell me, said that on some of these small EMS boards and stuff, with the rate of inflation, that they're actually passing over their caps for an audit. And it's hard to get auditors, so what we're trying to do is just raise those caps. They're not doing anything different. It's just because inflation is going up and they're going past some of these thresholds, and it's requiring them to have audits. So that is something that I would not have known, but you know, one of my county judges reached out to me and let me know. One that's we've been working on for the last couple of years, and hopefully we can get a compromise, is trying to protect our roads from the metal wheels. And you know, we've all run up against the metal wheels, and they are doing some damage to our roads. So we're trying to compromise where maybe we can get at least rubber on the heavy farm equipment that's being pulled down the road, so it's not gouging the roads, but yet still exempts the horse and buggies that we know is messing up the road a little bit too. But so these are some small steps that are trying to get you know, some different things done in our community. I think we're going to really look into the education, how we can help our teachers. I was a teacher of the day, or a principal for the day down in Trigg County about a month ago, and we have some fantastic schools and fantastic teachers. I was able to duck my head in multiple classes, and I think we just got to give them the tools where we can increase our kids' reading scores and math scores, and tried to really help our education system. So,
Thank you. Representative Dossett?
Well, I do want to add to what Walker started right there with when he mentioned of the individuals we depend upon for advice. And I would offer this as encouragement to anyone that's elected to local office. I've shared this with Craig when he came to Frankfurt, and Walker and I have discussed this. In our own little areas, we've got, personally, I have good knowledge when it comes to certain venues, agriculture, things along that line. But I'm only as good as the individuals that I'm willing to listen to and take advice from. It is the most valuable asset that I have because so many, you'll see a lot in public office that think they know everything and they don't know squat. Because as I said, my individual path of the road, I can answer questions, but then I reach out beyond and ask people to share with me. And it has allowed me to better represent my constituents. And I will continue to do that. It makes my job a lot easier. Looking at things that we will be focused on here in this upcoming session, as I mentioned, legislation dealing with the eminent domain, but I've got a personal burr underneath my saddle, and I'm working on legislation, and that's dealing with vapes and our children getting access to these vapes. Within our school system, I've had conversations there with the schools at the high school level. I think the number I was told since the beginning of the year, there have been 50 students caught with vapes. 25 of those, a little more than 50% have Delta 8 and Delta 9. It's THC. Middle school, the number's a little lower. I think we're looking at about 42 of the students that have been caught with these things. And it's the same issue. It's not all nicotine, it's THC that's in those. And it has made me madder than a hornet. And for those individuals that have businesses that are selling these things that our kids are getting access to them, your time is coming because you're harming our children. I am working on legislation. If these things are ordered online, they're going to have to be verified at delivery that whoever is purchasing that is 21 years of age. We're not going to take a chance that someone who's 13, 14, 15 years old is getting a hold of these things. Because number one, the THC is scary enough, but we do not know what the impact of those chemicals within those vapes are going to have on future generations. So that's going to be something I'm working on. And as I said, if there are any local businesses that are selling these things and our children are getting access and you're not IDing, your time is coming, because I am really upset that this is taking place within our school systems.
Thank you. Craig?
I like fired up Myron. That's fun. I'll just kind of go through a quick list. I talked about 340B. I'm going to be filing that bill again next year to really help out our hospitals, and that will impact rural hospitals the most. So it has a direct impact on what Jenny Stewart does here. Another bill, I saw the sheriff back there, and then another bill I'm going to be working on is a fentanyl bill to increase, to put more language on our aggravated trafficking If you're caught with fentanyl, there's trafficking, and then there's aggravated trafficking. The pill form of fentanyl is not part of the statute. You could be caught with 100 pills of fentanyl. The statute is 28 grams. Is that right, Katie? 28 grams is 14,000 lethal doses. I think that's too high, too. And I talked to Clayton Adams in Muhlenberg today and told him that we're going to work on that. But if you had 100 pills of fentanyl, the lab could test that and weigh it out, and it could be less than 10 grams, so it's not going to bump up to aggravated trafficking. You got 100 pills of fentanyl, it's not personal use. I mean, that's just a fact. So we're going to work on legislation, and I've already got about 14, 15 people in the Senate. I just mentioned it for the first time last week. About 14 or 15 other senators that are going to co-sign on that immediately. So I think that's going to be good legislation that we're going to work on. I think as the Senate as a whole is going to look at a lot of economic development legislation, and that most of that will coincide with how we work the budget, but I've heard a lot of rumblings about economic development, deregulating certain aspects. There's a lot of task force right now. They're going to be looking into AI. I don't think you're going to see a lot of legislation trying to regulate AI, more or less just trying to understand it right now and keep our eye on it. There's a lot of talk and rumblings about aviation and how we can push that forward, not just how our local farmers can really push to excel aviation in the future with alternative fuels, but how we can attract more jobs and businesses that are surrounding aviation across the country here in the Commonwealth. And so I think a lot of those things are going to be kind of percolating through the Senate chambers and House chambers, and just a little bit of taste of some of the things that I'll be working on specifically next session as well.
Thank you. AI and aviation, that kind of
Yeah.
works out good, right? So let's shift our focus. I'm going to stay with you, Craig. We're going to shift our focus and talk about House Bill 1 a little bit. And so getting ready for this evening, I was doing a little research, kind of just seeing what was kind of happening with the bill. If I remember correctly, 2022 is when it came in. The General Assembly has been able to reduce income tax from 6% now to 3.5%, which will be starting here calendar year 2026. As Walker, as you mentioned that, or maybe it was Myron, my apologies if I got it wrong, that Senator Petrie was the architect behind that bill, and within that bill he put two triggers, right? The first of which, to try to make it really simple, I've seen it put a bunch of different ways, that the reserve fund balance is at least 10% of what total general fund receipts were in the fiscal year that just ended. And then revenue in the prior fiscal year would have exceeded general fund spending even if the income tax rate had been 1 full percentage point lower, essentially a balanced budget kind of review. So just last month, the Senate Budget Committee Chair, Republican Senator Chris McDaniel, stated that according to the Office of State Budget Director that in fiscal year 2025 that ended in June 30th, we were a little bit short of meeting one of those triggers, trigger number 2. $7.5 million less than projected in revenues, which is a small amount out of $15 billion. However, Andy Beshear, I believe it was just a few weeks ago, had noted that according to the Consensus Forecasting Group, that they're looking at a possible budget shortfall of $305 million, which is considerably higher, 2%. The $15 billion budget, he cited issues with tariffs kind of going with that and some of the slowing of the economy. But I guess since this bill's inception, this is the first time there's kind of been some challenges that are going to hit those triggers. And so kind of what is the General Assembly's thought processes and how they're going to attack that going forward, and what are kind of the goals to continue to reduce that to zero? I mean, I guess I know that we know the goal, right, but what are going to be the actions taken in order to get there if possible?
One, we took this last session, excuse me, we passed legislation that allows those triggers to not just be half percents, but smaller incremental percents. Had that already been in place, we would have hit one of those triggers this last year. Senator McDaniel talked about that $7.5 million. I think that doesn't, you could look at it two ways. Man, we missed it, or we're doing it the right way. A methodical, responsible approach with what I consider sacred funds, taxpayer funds, in getting us down to zero. Now, we're in a little bit different position here in Hopkinsville than Senator McDaniel's part of the state, Northern Kentucky. We're right on the border of Tennessee, so the reminder that we have every single day is very real of how much it's needed and how fast we want to get to zero. That is not reflected across the state as a whole, although I do think and I truly feel the ultimate goal is to get to zero. Getting there still needs to be a thoughtful, methodical approach. And I think one of those ways to get there a little bit faster, so that we could sort of check our timeline in a more accurate and more regular process, was passing a bill in this last session that allows us to drop those triggers by smaller percentage points. Whether, be a quarter or this or that, but it's not just 0.5% anymore. And again, we would have hit that trigger had that already been in place. So I think that's one approach, is trying to speed that up a little bit, but also it allows us, every time we get to that point, we can sort of do a self-evaluation. I know the governor said that we're going to have a shortfall. We've had those members from the budget office come in. They're not entirely sure on those numbers and where they're coming from. It's a projection. Luckily, the General Assembly is going to really look at those numbers and see where we are. We had taxes being deferred to when they were going to be paid, and a lot of that goes into play with I think the governor's office making that projection. But it is also something that was prepared for. We do have a rainy day fund, but it doesn't mean we can just start cutting checks left and right. And we certainly can't do it when we're not in session and it's not part of the bill. So I would temper that that panic a little bit that we're going to have this significant shortfall. But yes, it has created friction, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It means it's working, in my opinion, because we're doing it the right way at the right approach.
The triggers were put in place to keep from a Kansas situation.
Exactly.
Myron or Walker, you guys would like to
I do want to
add?
add to this right here, and as Craig mentioned, I think it's understandable that we are going to see some lower revenue coming in because our income tax is dropping, number one. I know the conversations that I've had with Chairman Petrie and his staff, and it's something Jason sometimes aggravates me. He is so thoughtful and cautious with his projections and what he's looking at spending. He's the type of person that needs to be in that position. It's hard to get something through. You have to prove that there's actually, it's easy to spend. He wants you to show what the actual return is going to be. And I think the world of him for being that way. He is stern. Now, coming back to the possible shortfall. For myself personally, I have little faith in the numbers that come from Governor Andy Beshear's office. And I'll share with you why. We have no further look than the Meals on Wheels program. Our area development districts came and spoke to Chairman Petrie and told him when we were putting the budget together 2 years ago, we believe there's going to be a shortfall of about $10 million. Chairman Petrie told him to told those individuals, get with the cabinet, come back and give me the number that you need. The cabinet was adamant. The number we projected is correct. You do not have to listen to what they're telling you. Guess what the shortfall was? Exactly the amount that the area development districts were telling. There is another issue that happened as we were putting the budget together 2 years ago, as we were doing the education budget. We found out that the average daily attendance for about half the school districts across Kentucky was overestimated. Excuse me. No, they were underestimated. There was going to be a shortfall in the money that we were going to put into the schools. We were blessed that our superintendent here for Christian County, Chris Bensel, and his staff caught the issue. We were able to make sure that we got that number corrected before we put it into the budget. So for my part, as we're doing this, and we don't have access to the numbers that are coming through from the budget office. The House and the Senate don't have access to those numbers. But I'm of the belief maybe it's time for us to have, because there's a part of me that thinks that the governor did this intentionally. What two more groups could you harm more than children and seniors for a man that's running to be president of the United States? I have little faith from what I've seen, and then blame the General Assembly He blamed us for the shortfall when it was his group that made that. So, for that, I've said my spiel.
We're getting Myron fired up, aren't we?
Well, I've been
Multiple
here
issues.
long enough, 20 years. Like I said, January marks my 20th year. I have no problem. I've got close friends that we serve with that are Democrats there in Frankfurt. I don't judge them on party basis. But the governor has spoken to me one time since he's been in office. That's almost 8 years. And I'm not saying I deserve to be spoken to, but if you're trying to do something here for the Commonwealth, the best thing to do is to get people on your side. I have meetings with the Democrat members of my ag committee once a week because I want them to understand what we're doing and I want them to be in support. Governor would be it would do him well to do the same thing.
And on the subject on cutting that income tax, I've been, for the last 8 years, or I guess 9 now, I have always filed tax exempting military pensions. And Carter, you've been up there testifying how it would be such a boom for our area. And Jason lives in our area. It would be a boon for his district, but he is holding pat. He doesn't want to crack it open any of how we're methodically getting rid of the income tax. I'd love to tax exempt the military pensions and get more of these higher officers living in Kentucky instead of Tennessee. Think about it, they would join our National Guard instead of the Tennessee National Guard. They send their kids to our schools instead of Tennessee's. It's a win-win. I've tried different things. Sometimes you can hand a bill off to a new person and it gets passed. And when other times, you keep fighting and hopefully one day I think we will get there. But the cost, it was like $10 million to the state. Now I think we're down to 6 to 7-ish. So it is not a big cost to the state, but I think the revenue that would bring in would be huge.
And we've lowered that income tax without having an increase to the sales tax and without putting sales tax upon groceries or pharmaceuticals.
And that is exactly right.
Thank you for all's context and responses to that question. One more on House Bill 1, and then we'll move to questions from the crowd. One of the triggers is that revenue has exceeded general fund spending, right? So we talked about the revenue side of things, and we could get really in the weeds and talk about more dynamics there, but let's talk about the expense side. So let's just say if these numbers do hold, I know that you have some skepticism that you've expressed, especially Myron, that you have. Let's say if they do hold. Are there any spending cut measures that the General Assembly is looking at that might be able to offset that a little bit to get us to that trigger point again?
You know, I know Chairman Petrie is just adamant about wants and needs, and we need to do that in our own homes. You know, it's like you can all have wants. That shiny new car is a want, but do we really need it? And he's been adamant about that. And so I just met yesterday, the day before, some of the days run together. I'm now chairman of a budget sub-review of appropriations and revenue for personnel, public pensions, and finance. So I've actually gotten in there now and met with the cabinet and our folks, LRC and our paid staff and stuff, and trying to look at the numbers. And it's amazing. As we're going through line item after line item, and the budget is, I think, 170, 200 pages. So we're going over last year's budget. And first thing Chairman Petrie will sit there and say is that really needed? Well, let's take that out. And we will. We'll cross it right off the list, and so it's coming out of the budget. And so to say any one item, it would be hard, but no, there's a lot of eyes on it that are going line item by line item. Jason is also, I'm sorry, I'm bouncing back. We all know him as Jason. I know you all know him as Chairman Petrie. But he's talking maybe at a point, and I think he's going to start, of zero-line budgeting, where you basically, everybody starts at zero. Now say, okay, how much staff and how much is it going to cost? And we'll tack that on. And how much for maintenance of the vehicles? We'll tack that on. And I think that is a way really to cut waste. Let the departments justify why they're spending the money, and so often in all of our budgets, because I served on city council here for a while, you kind of start at this number. It's like, and then everyone has their requests. We need X number of dollars more this year. Well, let's start at zero and you justify every dollar that you need all the way up. So I think Chairman Petrie is looking at that. It's going to be very time consuming, and but that's something where we can really trim the budget down to its bare bones.
Either of our other two elected officials brave enough to answer that question? I'm sure you are, Myron. I saw you.
I mean, when we look at the percentage of our budget, the vast majority of it is made up of what we put into education, Medicaid. You're looking at nearly 70% of the budget. So the remainder of the budget is what we use to come back to projects. I've watched Chairman Petrie, as I said. I've got projects that I would love to fund to see money be there, but he does remind me that when you're making a request, he wants to know how much you're requesting, but he wants to see the return. Because in the end, it's your money. It's not our money that we're playing with up in Frankfurt. It's all of the taxpayers of the Commonwealth. So, as I said, Jason can be a little frustrating, but he is the type of individual, we're fortunate to have him in that position. I've watched how good he is, and he's good.
I'll give you some insights on a number. So less than 10 years ago, our Medicaid budget was $10 billion, roughly $10 billion. Today, it sits at about $22 billion is the number we're going to be starting at. So it's our number 2 largest ask. If you take kindergarten through higher education, that's our number 1 budget item. Number 2 is healthcare, and that is 99% Medicaid. We're at $22 billion, but in that decade, less than a decade, there's actually less people on Medicaid than were 10 years ago. So why is that? If we have less people on, why have we doubled the budget? And part of that is, again, the complete expansion of what the program is today as opposed to what it was intended to be. One budget item in that is about $300 million. The next closest state for this is simply just a what's the word? A claim. Okay. Someone comes in. You can write it in, submit the expense to the payers that pay out these expenses. That one code has cost the state between $240 and $300 million. The next closest state that utilizes that same code is $17 million. Why? No other state even allows the code. They don't have, Medicaid doesn't pay for it. And so why did that happen? And that code has only been in existence for 3 years. Well, since COVID. So we've had an incredible expansion of Medicaid. So when I say Medicaid, we're not looking to take the people off of Medicaid that meet the poverty level, the children that meet those levels, the people that need to be on it, the disabled, the seniors. That's not who we're talking about. One, we're talking about, and Secretary Ball found $800 million in misappropriated funds. That's a pretty staggering number, considering that people are going across state lines and receiving the same benefits, and their state's charging the same thing to Medicaid.
What's the governor's shortfall?
$300 million. We found $800 million. Well, that we could find in the software, and that was human error, and there was no accountability along the way. So I think those are some steps that we can take. They're going to be hard pills to swallow. They're going to be hard conversations to have. It's going to create a lot of friction. And it's not a matter of just using that to get to zero. It's using that to get a healthcare program back to the way it was intended for, so that the people that deserve to be on it get the treatment that they need, and it's not overcomplicated with the fraud, waste, and abuse that does exist.
Thank you very much, all three of your responses, Craig, especially for the detail and the numbers behind that. I know it's a very heavy topic, like you said, be very, very difficult. We're about 2/3 of the way, or a little bit over half of the way through, and I would like to open up this as an opportunity for any of those who are in attendance this evening. If you would like to ask a question to our elected officials here, please take this opportunity to do so.
Don't be shy.
I've got a whole long list of questions, but I don't want to have to get too deep into them just yet. So we have.
I talked to Walker about this at an earlier time, this thing about eminent domain and acquisition of, say, property, especially, say, private property, by an entity, say, such as, say, city government, using a property maintenance code and perhaps the setting, say, of tax liens. I've got some real concerns about that because I've lost, say, 3 houses myself, have been, say, torn down, and I'm having to, even the house I've recently bought and moved in, I have a difficult time getting in this house because, and I think partially because I've been primarily the person that complained an awful lot about the situation. And in 2024, I had called the Legislative Research Commission and asked to come to Frankfurt to testify about this issue. Now, I was told more or less not to come, but however, the mayor and the county judge went. And my overall focus was to come and speak on behalf of the people. And my mention is this: I speak for the poor. When I say speak for the poor, I mean from the white middle class on down, because poverty is a compelling issue. And the right, say, to own property is even far more compelling, because you cannot own a business if you cannot own a house, because you need something to put up, say, to finance that business venture. So this thing about property ownership in Hopkinsville and the city acquisition of property, I'm having some real problems with that. And Mr. Richardson, also, you mentioned this thing about this health insurance. I'm a senior citizen, and I've got problems with my health insurance, and I'll be getting in contact with you.
Please do.
I'm not sure that was a question. I didn't hear the question. I do encourage y'all to pick up a legislature questionnaire in the back. I set some on the table, and sure enough, my last couple of questions is that, do you believe Kentucky's eminent domain laws should be updated in the following areas? And then addressing the compensation property owners receive when their land is condemned, including potentially basing it on replacement value more so than fair market value. So those are some concerns, and it's a big enough concern that at the state, it's looking like we are going to try to look into those a little bit more for you.
One of the questions that has come up as we've worked on this legislation is so many times individuals that may have this eminent domain used upon them, a lot of things aren't able to be looked at until it goes into the court process. Well, the goal is to have this information up front rather than to see it go to the court process. In the end, it's going to save the property owner and the state of Kentucky or the government entity the money from having to go through a legal process. So, like I said, this is going to be more concerning property owner rights and making sure the property owner is fairly treated. As I've mentioned, anyone that I've spoken to, no one's against looking for. They're not opposed to progress. They just want to make sure that they're treated fairly.
And Myron, this is Troy. I was going to ask the same question about you expounding on what it is you exactly want to do, and to give the cities the opportunity to work with you in terms on eminent domain. Just for clarity, no municipality wants these vacant lots, none. And as you talk about, as the senator spoke about sacred monies, it is sacred to spend $300,000 a year in this town cutting grass, and it rains, and it looks like we're just wasting money, or an additional $100,000 for an attorney to help us find the owners of these lots. We're not good at taking care of buildings. I don't think we need to open the blinds to let you see that, or look down at the depot or anywhere else. We don't want them, but we also don't want to be the only city outside of Louisville with 1,000 or more vacant lots.
Right.
You mentioned comparing us to Clarksville. I don't have another city manager in Kentucky to talk to with this many vacant lots. None, not even Lexington. So we want help on our side too, because it is sacred. The biggest thing in our budget that we waste is cutting people's grass, and they know we cut it, and they live in other cities, and they don't treat their properties like this. So that there's, as it says, wisdom has two sides. We don't want it.
Sure.
We want help too.
Well, and there, once again, I come back and when we have the discussion concerning the lack of homes being built, it's cost of infrastructure. That's where the problem is. There are ideas out there that could lower the cost of putting infrastructure in, and I hope everyone will take those into consideration. It's important to be able for someone making that investment to build that home. As I said, I'd rather us, perfect example, here's one that's coming up that I had a conversation just over the weekend, the accident that happened out on Lover's Lane. We know there's additional homes being built, low-income homes that are being built. It's going to be a huge amount of people. You've got a school going in over there. The traffic's heavy. Friday morning, I had a property owner call me there from Lover's Lane and ask me, is there something you can do to help slow the vehicles down? I was on the phone with Sheriff DeArmond and on the phone with the mayor of making sure that we got law enforcement out there and what we could do. I wish the gentleman had contacted me Friday a week ago rather than last Friday, because I personally knew the individual that lost her life. I know him and his wife both. So these are all things that we're trying to do. As I said, we want to look at ways that what we can do from Frankfort to encourage homes being built and to create opportunities for local governments that we might be able to help you do things to lower the cost of getting that infrastructure in. So, as I said, that's the biggest expense, which keeps people from developing homes.
Yes, sir.
Individual home ownership, because if people say own these homes and live in certain neighborhoods, they have a certain amount of pride, so you have a certain same mentality, I think that develops. But if people are moving in and out 2 or 3 times a year, you don't have that type of solidarity. So it is incumbent on the city to do something to promote individual home ownership, because I think that is the right thing to do.
You know, someone reached out to me and he had a good idea. In fact, he was here a second, he just left, so I would give him kudos for this idea, is having the state have like a pool of money that sits there and lets local developments come in and develop a subdivision, because a lot of the infrastructure cost is the highest part of it. But develop the subdivision and then pay back to the state after each lot is sold. So once the whole subdivision is sold out, the state would get its money back, and then you have 40, 60, 80 new homes. I think that's a great idea. I mean, hope we can find some money to carve out. Hopefully it's a fund that we can put aside, and the money would kind of revolve. You know, Hopkinsville, our problem is 52% are rentals in Hopkinsville. And that hurts y'all's, Philip, it hurts your tax base, because the rentals don't appreciate like home ownership. And so if we can get more home ownership, then that will help the tax base and everything. And it just gives people pride. You know, for generations, they'll be able to at least hand assets down to their kids, and it keeps you living in Hopkinsville instead of like a rental. You know, all of a sudden you're here today and gone tomorrow because you found a better option somewhere else. So these are things that I know state can play a part and help with, but we are going to have to work with our county and our local cities to try to figure out the best system for it.
This is kind of a county question. But, so 115 between Pembroke and Oak Grove, we know that the project's been approved going from there to I-24. Do we know a progress update on when, and I think phase one's going to Anderson Lane and then phase two, but do we have a time frame of when we might see something there?
Yes, Philip, I know back the 1st of October, I had a meeting with Chairman Upchurch. We were looking over the highway plan. We know right now, the interchange for I-24 for the Buc-ee's location. That's number one. Number two is that project there at Anderson Road. Then we finish up the road. The project's coming. It's taking a little time. I don't think we're not in the push that we were since the situation that has come about with the send elements. And here's one I do want to share with everyone, the situation with the send elements. I think we're all very much aware of the situation, what's going on there, and in the event a worst-case scenario were to take place because of that business, I have had conversations with Congressman Comer. Jamie and I have spoken about this. I've had conversations with Ag Commissioner Jonathan Schell. I've had conversations with House leadership and with Chairman Petrie on this, because our goal is, in the event something happens, a sin does not materialize, that property's got to be used. We've got to be having feelers out trying to locate businesses, industries that's willing to locate, which once again goes back to why I said there is money that has been going to economic development. It's going into the Department of Agriculture. And I promise this, you won't have anything rammed down your throat locally from the Department of Agriculture. You will not be forced to do a certain project. And I think that may have had some impact here on some things locally. I don't believe it's fair to put our local governments at risk of having something like this happen. So that is one of the reasons we're working on that. But we do have the funding, because as we move through, we want to make sure that property, if a sin doesn't come about, that property's got to be used. It's got to be utilized. So we're going to make sure the funding stays there for 115 to get that road completed coming through.
Thank you for the conversation. I actually had most of those things on my list, so it makes my job easy when you all participate. I wanted to say thank you for referencing infrastructure and talking about that. I live off of Lover's Lane. That was a tragedy a couple of weeks ago that my wife and I knew was only a matter of time, so I appreciate you referencing that
And, you know,
and the work you're doing to help
we
with
did
that.
have the conversation, should we look at doing construction on that road? But there's not enough, it would be impossible to widen because of the property owners that live there. So the main thing is going to be to make sure, and as I said, thank you to Mayor Knight, Chief Newby, to Judge Executive Gillum, and Sheriff DeArmond, because we are going to start, that was the question that was asked Friday morning, and I wish it had been asked to me a week prior to that, so we could have had people out there patrolling. And I don't want any of the people who live out there, I don't want you to get speeding tickets, so do watch your speed. But it's something similar to Pembroke Road. Chief Newby actually put law enforcement on Pembroke Road for me because of the high rate of speed coming to the industrial park. I was having citizens that live in Pembroke, and in particular the boss at my house, who was having someone nearly ran her off the road. And I did not want to be fussed at anymore, so Chief Newby actually put law enforcement out there, and they were able to slow that traffic down. We're happy for people to be working here, but we also want them, and we have to take care of the people that actually reside in those areas. We want those people to be safe.
So we talk with local leaders, kind of the big issues they talk about are housing, infrastructure, and workforce, right? So we've covered housing. We've covered infrastructure a little bit lightly, and we can get a little bit deeper in that if the time allows. But let's talk about workforce. development for a second and talk about maybe a kind of a specific issue to get your stance on these as our voices in Frankfurt. Currently, right now, labor participation rate in the state of Kentucky is 58.2%. That's as of August numbers, which is ranked 7th lowest in the country. One of the barriers that people will express to entering the workforce is affordable child care. And just a couple of months ago, Governor Andy Beshear, he released his Pre-K for All initiative, which he suggested $172 million to invest into that program. And it cited some studies that we won't go into the veracity of those studies and the accuracy of them, but cited that it would have some improvements and some return from a workforce development standpoint. I think it's important whenever the governor puts forth a plan that is that large and ambitious that we hear y'all's thoughts on that and how you feel about the possibilities there, if it's warranted, if it's needed, if it's possible, et cetera. So we'll start with you, Walker, and we'll go through, and unless somebody else wants to jump in. So
Craig hasn't spoken in a while, but I mean,
I'm happy to go.
you,
come on,
Yeah.
come on, Mr.
you looked
Richardson.
pretty anxious
I've got-
down there.
I've
I'm
got
like,
a little information to
Yeah.
share on that one as well.
I'll
Great
play clean
idea.
up.
I mean, it is. It's a great idea. How are we going to pay for it and who's going to do it? Those are questions the governor's office hasn't answered. He's got a number of how much it'll cost, but where it's going to come from and what it's really going to cost, he can't answer. We also don't have the workforce to do it. So what we're asking for is, we have a crisis of teacher pay in the state of Kentucky. That is a fact. My mom said this the other day. To work in that job, kindergarten through senior in high school, but especially at that age group, pre-K, 3 to 4-year-olds, that takes a person that is called of God to do that work for nothing. I'm serious. I mean, we are paying nothing. And so we have that crisis that exists today. And then the governor says, great, find more jobs. With what money? And with what workforce? For what pay? Those questions aren't answered. It was never intended, and we know this from conversations that have happened in the executive branch. They know this is a pipe dream. He does this every 2 years. He throws out something that's unrealistic, and when it doesn't happen because it can't, the General Assembly, those darn Republicans, they hate kids. No, we don't. It's a great idea. It's just not possible. And I know some of the studies they've thrown out there, those, if you study the states, if you take the studies from the states that have done that, some of those states have already rolled back universal pre-K because it hasn't worked, because the scores actually are dropping amongst those kids. It hasn't improved workforce numbers. It did maybe the first year, but the anomalies went away. Those numbers did not stand. The finances didn't stay true, and the workforce to provide for those children didn't exist. I asked someone on a panel that was very pro pre-K about an alternative idea, and that was, what if we had a rebate system that allowed the private institutions that already exist for daycare and pre-K to have a rebate to allow a cost offsetting for parents who put their kids there? She said, that's a great idea. You know what that is? That's a voucher, and they hate it, and they won't let us do it, and they constitutionally have struck it down every single time, and they have spent upwards of $45 to $50 million over the last 10 years fighting us as a General Assembly on those kind of programs. But she admitted that's what she wanted. But it can't work. They don't want it to work that way. They don't want a voucher program, and I'm not saying that's the answer to it. What they want is, here's the idea, shoot it down, we'll make you the villain. I don't care if I'm the villain. I don't care if I'm the hero. I want to do the right thing for everybody at the right price with the right people. And we don't have those answers. It's not possible right now.
Myron?
I have a meeting, I think it's December the 12th, with someone from the governor's office concerning this issue. And I hope they don't hear this tonight because they may not want to come talk to me in my office. As Craig said, the suggestion is a great idea if it could be done. I have a grandson that's 4 years old. It would be a great idea. He's at home now. His grandmother keeps him. He's not in daycare, and for those who don't have access to a grandparent or someone, yes, they have. It's a cost to have daycare. But the group that was put together by the governor had no daycare owners involved. Now, here's what you have to understand about the daycares, the cost. They lose money on infants, 1 and 2-year-olds. Their business is a loss to have those children at those facilities. They break even and make a little bit of a profit on 3 and 4-year-olds. I do not want to do anything that harms our daycare system, because what do we do if we shut those daycares down and there's no place for those infants, 1 or 2-year-olds, for families that both spouses are working? Governor, I don't know what they ever thought of it. I think Craig's absolutely right. It'll be one of those issues that we are horrible people because we didn't want to fund his plan, but I'm not going to harm a private business. Now, I think there is going to be something that you will see along the lines of what Craig mentioned. There will be something that will make sure that we have people that are qualified teach in those daycares for those 3 and 4-year-olds. And there will be probably some money. We're already using money from the tobacco settlement to go to offset some of the costs for daycare. And it also takes care of what we call the STARS program to make sure the daycares are qualified. I've got a feeling that's the direction the General Assembly is going to go, because we as a state could not afford to create another bureaucracy and put it on the backs of the citizens. I would love to do it, but there's not enough money. And by the way, the governor says we got a $300 million shortfall. So,
Thank you both for answering.
Lack of thought.
Cody, I'm going to be real quick on it, because Sandra and I have been blessed. We just had our 7th grandchild 2 weeks ago. But the benefit of that is we got to keep his older sister, who's two and a half. And the time spent at such a small age needs to be with the family, with the mom and the dad and grandparents. I mean, that is more important, instead of just turning our youth over to the government at even an earlier age.
I appreciate all three of you answering that question. I know it's a very difficult one. I think that's the purpose of these town halls is to talk about the difficult issues, so I appreciate all y'all's candid responses there. I'm going to stay on education just for a second. So, Craig, I definitely agree with you that it takes a saint to work. I learned tonight that your mother was my 4th grade teacher.
And look
so,
how you turned out.
Yeah,
she had to be a saint to have me in school that young, right? So I understand that. But keeping on the terms of workforce development, as we all know, we have a new high school that is being built here, which the primary purpose is shifting from a traditional approach to education to a CTE, career technical education, focused facility. What are some things that the General Assembly is working on to help support those efforts in CTE education to make this successful? I know a lot of stuff at KDE kind of focuses on the more traditional approach, and is there things that are going to be put into place to help support the school?
I think what we've already seen so far, and he's a personal friend, but I think he's done a stellar job at the KCTCS, is Dr. Ryan Quarles. It's weird for me to call him Dr. Ryan Quarles, but he's a doctor in 5 or 6 different ways, none of which could operate on me. But I think what KCTCS is trying to do across the state, and I'll make it a local impact in a second, is trying to facilitate sort of that integration model of you're not just going there to learn, but you're learning a trade there, whether that is your CDL license, welding. I think they are the largest training grounds for welders across the state of Kentucky now. Welders are coming out making well, more money than teachers. So that trade world that KCTCS is sort of leaning into, I think is going to have generational impact across the Commonwealth on what they're able to do and provide for us. And I think these new educational models can sort of connect with that at an early stage. We're seeing here in Christian County, it's going to start in freshman year. We're going to go through and you sort of pick your track, and if those things change, I think the community college and even Murray State being right next door, they're going to play an integral part in helping students continue to navigate a path forward, giving them direction and something to look forward to, but also giving them opportunities on what you can do with these talents now and in the future. So I hope that relationship continues. I think Dr. Quarles has done a wonderful job in sort of making that a really big focus point for the community colleges across the Commonwealth, and I think that's very, very important. As we see student debt rise and the number of people that are in the workforce that are not doing what they went to college for, or this or that, but then the number of jobs that are needed in that trade area. I mean, nobody cares if you're a lawyer if your HVAC went out, you know. So I think it's important that we sort of boost and take any stigma away from those career paths, and highlight they are financially viable, and they are good. They impact not just local communities, but create generational wealth and opportunities. And to kind of go back to a point talking about housing, deregulate the way we do housing across the Commonwealth, so that a developer in Christian County and a developer in Jefferson County are all on the same page of what they can do. That's one approach, but another approach is our economic development. I think that starts with our high school education. What are we teaching? How are we getting involved in the workforce early? What ownership do those students have in the workforce early? I think all that can play a key role in changing that generational tide of our economic development, and then that can start the process of creating that generational wealth.
Thank you. Myron, do you have anything to add?
Ask me the question in 2 years. I've got one that'll be a freshman next year at the new school, and at that point, then I will be a little wiser on what we're doing. I think the plan is great. We want to get those children in a career path to begin with right off the bat, and move them on to something they're successful in life. Walker, I'm very proud of what he's done. And Walker, I'm going to let you share what you're doing there to help with the workforce within our schools.
Well, this happened a few years ago. Beverly Fort, who is development for teachers at our Christian County school system. This was right after COVID. It was maybe even during COVID and stuff. But we passed an Option 8 that allowed teachers to be able to get their degree, but still work in the school systems and actually get paid for doing that. So they could do both at the same time, and that's really helped fill some of our teacher roles. I was able to go to a school one time up in Indianapolis, and yes, it was a charter school, but this was early when I got elected, and it was amazing. They had taken a old warehouse in downtown Indianapolis in kind of a blighted area, and they converted it to a school that, Margaret, it was mainly for the arts. And you might know the school I'm talking about. It's in downtown Indianapolis. It's phenomenal. We walked in, and the kids were all focused, whether it be artistic painting like Sandra does, or whether it be the musical arts or theatrical. Everyone was kind of going their last 4 years. They still taught the basics, but they were kind of focusing on a field that they wanted to go in. And I just thought it was amazing to do that. Is there a way to integrate some of that into our public school systems where you could have things like that, whether it be Hopkinsville? Get that started, Margaret, there. So, but there you go. But these are some of the things that we got to think of outside of the box. I love what our local school is going to be doing, is kind of getting people going in the right direction. I remember when I first got elected, being at the high school and sitting there saying, okay, now what would y'all like to be when you grow up? Basketball player, basketball player, okay, wait, we're not going to have that many NBA players. We got to get everybody focused on some kind of career field.
I do, well, you mentioned Margaret, and I do want to brag on Margaret for what she's doing with her young people. The program where you've had them doing the painting there at the Alhambra. I know some of those young ladies that have come in there and worked and have helped do that. Now, a part of their life is invested in that building. And I want to thank you for what you've done because it's so beneficial for our youth. We want them to have pride in this community, as I said, I don't want mine to go away to live somewhere. I would like for them to choose Christian County for the place where they call home, that they raise a family. So, Margaret, thank you so very much for what you've done.
Myron, you actually kind of just sparked something that I wanted to ask before we left today, and I was going to have the floor for some final questions from our guests, but since it's kind of flows into it, you talked about Margaret and the work that she's doing at the Arts Council. So, I wanted to keep this very local base, talk about the state. Obviously, we can't ignore what's happening at the federal level because it affects downstream. With the Big Beautiful Bill, a lot of the cuts at the federal level, we're seeing the government shutdown right now that's causing some stresses as we're starting to see, especially the SNAP program. 575,000 Kentuckians rely on. It's going to go dark on November 1st. But also, I know that like the National Endowment of the Arts is having some large cuts to it. There's a lot of nonprofits who are struggling right now. How is the state going to step in and ensure that these nonprofits can continue to do the work that they do in partnership with your work?
Do you mind? Do you mind?
Yeah, go ahead.
One of the things that must be done, a lot of the funding that was coming in was due to COVID. It's one-time money. We cannot live on that one-time money. Yes, there are cuts coming. I wish they weren't, but that's the case. Let's look at the issue with the government shutdown right now with SNAP. The governor is a part of a group that's suing, wanting USDA to access funds to make sure SNAP is funded. The USDA does not have access to those funds. The dollars that are sitting there in USDA are obligated to an emergency in the event of a tornado, in the event of an earthquake, a natural disaster. That's what that money, it's by law. That's all it can be used for. I am a firm believer this shutdown is the biggest mess that's come about. You've got one party playing games with the citizens of our country. You're looking at the airlines with those individuals, pilots. You're looking across the board, and it's time. It's one thing to negotiate and have conversations, but do not come and try to hold every citizen of this nation hostage just trying to get your way. I'm a strong believer on this. I think what is going on in Washington is wrong. I think they're putting the citizens of our country that are in the most needy of situations, they're putting them at risk. And I would never, thank goodness we've never been put in that position that we've had to do something along that line in Frankfort, and I never would go along with it.
Up in state, we have different caucuses, and we're all members of Western Kentucky Caucus or Veterans Caucus or so, but I'm a member of the nonprofit caucus, and that there is some concern. I was supposed to have been in Elizabethtown yesterday, but I had a conflict, and it was just a small group getting together and talking about the issues that's coming across feeding Kentucky. As you know, up in Elizabethtown, that's kind of the central hub where food is dispersed, and every month food comes down to our Aaron McNeil house, run with Kurt Anderson, and once a month we have a food distribution out at the fairgrounds. And I've been a part of it, trying to help out over the last 9 years there, and I love it. It's kind of a no-ask, if you pull up, And what we're seeing is a lot of cars will come and get like 7 or 8 boxes, and they're feeding their neighborhood. And some of that program has been cut, and I think that's what the meeting was about. So I'm going to reach out to the Feeding Kentucky and see what we can do. If the state does have a budget surplus fund, or rainy day fund, is there some money that we can allocate over? A couple of weeks ago, when it was the senior meals that were being cut, I went to Trigg County, and Sissy let me ride with one of the drivers to see. We delivered 48 meals or something along that line, and I never saw a citizen out there, one of the seniors in Trigg County, that did not need that. In fact, we walked into one house, and there was this lady that was bundled up cold on the couch. And it's so hard. I did this on a Friday. We delivered her meal, but just to know that the next human contact that she might even encounter won't be until Monday when we come again. And some of these individuals really need it. So we do have to find the money where we can focus a little bit that way.
Craig, would you like to add anything to that?
I think it's easy to be partisan sometimes, and it's easy to be cynical, but government still has a role. And that evolves over time, it evolves through generations, but we have an obligation to take care of people. I don't agree with the federal administration on some things and how they cut some things and others, because Kentucky's a different state than other states. Hopkinsville's a different city than other cities. We have direct impacts, and we need help in a lot of ways. It's ironic the amount of need that we have, but yet we're still one of the most charitable states in the country. And I think that's a credit to just who we are as a people in the Commonwealth. And like communities like Hopkinsville being one of the most charitable communities in this state. So to answer certain specifics in that, like the arts, we've had incredible funding for the arts from a state level in the past. And I think, someone like Margaret in the Pennyroyal Arts Council, having served on that board and seen firsthand the impact that it has, not just on the kids that come through there and the education that those programs offer, but the economic impact that it has to downtown, and how it is a crucial and sort of that one of those foundational pillars that create an economic impact. She can tell her story very well, and I listen. She always has my ear, and she knows that. I hope other nonprofits know how to sell as well as Margaret, because she does a really darn good job. And if she asks me to go to bat for her, I'm going to go to bat for her. Not everybody has a Margaret Prim. There's only one for a reason. And that's unfortunate. But I hope that other legislators across the Commonwealth, I hope other legislators across the country, whether it be they state and federal, can listen and do the ride-alongs for the food services and get embedded in the community and see what the real impact is. I'm a strong believer in a Reagan government that it should be limited, but it doesn't mean non-existent. And it doesn't mean that we don't have a responsibility through these nonprofits to provide things for those people who need it the most.
Thank you all three for answering that question. I'm glad that you, from a personal standpoint, glad that it's top of mind for you all and you're paying attention to that. A lot of nonprofits are going to struggle over the next few years, and as you said, government has a role, and these partners can help serve the goal without growing bureaucracy.
Sure.
Before we finish this evening, I would like to open up the floor for any additional questions. If we have any more, if the conversation has sparked anything of your interest and taken you to a place that you'd like to. Troy?
Our hospital's going to be closing in Kentucky. And those of us from Eastern Kentucky, particularly my family and friends over that way, are very worried with Appalachian or Regional Hospital and all those. Are we going to have hospitals closing in Kentucky?
Let me give you the shocking answer. Probably. But has nothing to do with what's happened in the funding. What's happened is, again, we've had a Medicaid expansion and a reliance on that expansion that is negligent in a lot of ways. There was a report by the Kentucky Policy Center saying that there'd be 35 hospitals closing. That won't happen. It'll happen like what happened here in Jenny Stewart. They'll be taken over. The news just broke today that Vanderbilt's paying $600 million to take over Tenovo in Clarksville. Mind you, a hospital that has performance levels that were worse than Jenny Stewart, but, you know, one's worth 600 and one's worth 0. We won't get into that again. Troy, to answer, I mean, yes, some will close. But there will be place fillers. I think a majority, we will not see 35 hospitals close. A man that I rely on, who is, to me, he's a savant in healthcare and Medicaid. His name's Mark Birdwhistle, works for the University of Kentucky, and he's just a remarkable person. And he gives me a lot of hope when he says these are scare tactics in a way. Being in healthcare is still profitable, immensely profitable. When payers say that they have these profit-loss ratios, they're still making billions and billions of dollars. I sell Medicare for a profession now, and Hopkinsville has been dramatically impacted with the amount of carriers that we can offer for Medicare. They're still making money, a ton of money. Pharmaceutical industry is still making billions and billions and billions in profit. Healthcare is still profitable. It's broken, but it's profitable. Hospitals still have a need to serve their community. We have to get our arms around the expansion of Medicaid and bring that back in, but also, and Senator Steve Meredith is one that's working on this, there need to be other models, and again, Mark Birdwhistle is a good one that is working on this with us, kind of on our healthcare committee in the Senate on what are different models than the current model that we have. And those models will offer different payment structures to allow these hospitals to be more flexible with how they submit claims and things like that. Hospitals closing is not always a bad thing as long as it's replaced with something better. And I think that, so I answered your question for a little bit of a shock factor. Maybe, yeah, there might be some that close. I don't think ARH is on the chopping block for that. I think ARH has an opportunity to expand. I think they're positioned well to do that. I think there's other great healthcare institutions that could expand as well, and I hope that they do. I think, you know, there was an idea, and I personally had it myself, that we could hold on to this community healthcare system. I don't know if that's a reality anymore, to hold on to these community healthcare systems, especially if they've allowed their funding models to be based on things that are not realistic. We have to get back to a reality with how healthcare is funded, how our hospitals recoup those costs. 340B is a big way to do that, and so hopefully we get that bill across the finish line finally this year. But yeah, I think there's going to be a disruption in the marketplace, but I would like to look at that as a positive way of that disruption creates an opportunity for us to have better healthcare outcomes and to access healthcare to a broader range of people.
Craig, am I right that these hospitals that may have an economic problem come about, that problem existed 10 years ago, and the expansion of Medicaid during COVID kept them afloat longer, and that's the issue has been there all along?
Yeah, Troy, I would tell you if that list, let's just go back to that 35 hospitals that the policy center said that we're going to close. Prior to COVID, that would probably have been about 60 hospitals if we had sort of advanced what we were. The expansion of Medicaid allowed them a parachute that was falsely inflated to exist. And so I think it's ironic that we probably should have had about 60 across the state, and some larger health institutions would have been in trouble for that. And then we went to 35. 35 are not going to close. They're going to be swallowed up by larger organizations, and that's probably okay. They might better serve rural Kentucky. I just hope it's not for $0, and that community can get something out of it. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit distracted by $600 million going into the Clarksville community, but, you know.
Now to share with all of you, these are the conversations that I have whenever we're in session on a regular evening, and I'm very blessed to have someone that will have talk about something like this. It's the same with Walker. Walker comes, spends time in my office, and the community is very blessed to have two that I think highly of representing Christian County in Frankfort.
Thank you. We will end with one last question from our audience this evening. Everybody? Good.
Hi, I just have a quick question. I am an employee of a local hotel, part of the CVB, and also part of KTIA. And my question has to do with transient tax. With the last 3 years, Airbnb refusing to pay the transient tax in the state of Kentucky, even though it's required by law, are there any changes being done to make them do this?
Yeah, so that bill got attached to one of my bills last year and got killed. I've been in talks with Airbnb. There must have been something going around today. I got 4 emails from Muhlenberg. If they can't fix the tax problem, it's dead in the water. They have an obligation to pay the taxes. They do it in other states through their platform. It can be paid. I'll kind of give you both sides of it. And to me, it's a non-starter if the tax issue doesn't get fixed, right? If they're not willing to play by the same rules that hotels have to play by, then they can't play the game. But private property rights, to me, really rule the day. You own a property, you want to rent it out to people, you should have the right to do that. I don't always have to agree with it, but I don't like dictating what people can do with their private property. But for me, that conversation doesn't even start until they're willing to play the fair game that everybody else has to play. I don't know if we're there yet. I was told we should have been there by now, and I don't think they've gotten the resolution that I was hoping for. I was told August, September, we should have some kind of settlement. It hadn't happened. So I don't know how far that's going to go next year. If you see my name attached to that bill, it's because we have a tax resolution for them to play the game. I can't sponsor it until they're willing to play fairly.
Thank you, Senator. So I'm a little bit past, or we are a little bit past the hard stop we had today. So I have failed as a facilitator. But if that is a sacrifice of the great conversation that we had, I'm okay with that. I may get fired and never asked back again. So, but for us to leave, very briefly, if you don't mind, and we'll start, Walker, with you as we began. Just give some parting comments for us as we leave here this evening.
Well, appreciate you having this, and Mayor and Troy, and putting this on. I think this is really good. Like I said, we are representatives, so we need to hear ideas from y'all. That was very enlightening, what you just mentioned about the tax and stuff, and I talked to Craig about it. And there's always an individual that usually knows a little bit more about one subject than the other, and he has been working on it quite a bit there. So this is, we want to thank y'all for coming out for the last hour and a half and actually sitting through this, and we hope it's been enlightening. And remember, reach out to us if there are concerns. Many of you already do, but if there are concerns, we're your voice for you, for the state.
Myron?
Well, I'll join Walker in thanking the mayor of the city of Hopkinsville for having us here this evening. It's always good for the citizens to know who we are and have an opportunity to speak with us. If you've got suggestions, questions, we need those right there. So I want to thank you for the opportunity. And once again, if something that you see that you think you need to share with us, please either email, contact us some way. Because sometimes things come up that if it's not for you contacting us, we would not be aware. So thank you, and I've enjoyed being here this evening.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much for everybody being here. I feel like I've got to exercise a little bit of privilege for a second. In my official capacity, I think this is the first time my mom has heard me speak. So my dad's heard me before, but in my official capacity as an elected state senator for the Commonwealth representing District 3, this is her first time. Maybe her last, but this was her first time. She was nervous about me doing this, thinking that the campaign was going to be grueling and then people were going to say mean things about me. She'll have to wait another couple years for a competitive campaign. But I'm here because of their support. their teaching, their diverse ideas, and the way I was raised to not allow myself to think inside of a box, but despite having viewpoints and convictions and ideologies about things, to be open to listening to other people's experiences. Because and that's one thing that I think is wonderful about Hopkinsville, is it is a diverse community of people that have an incredible richness of experiences, and it is an honor to serve this community specifically. It's the best district a senator can serve in the Commonwealth, and I mean that truly. Because of our diverseness between manufacturing and agriculture, the arts, the men and women. We've got amazing women in Hopkinsville that lead, not just my mom, but women that lead, that stand tall, and it's just an incredible community to be proud to represent, and it keeps me in check and keeps me in line, and so I'm thankful for that.
Thank you all for your parting thoughts. I agree, Greg. I am married to one of those strong leader
Yes, you are.
women, and so I know exactly what you're saying. She's probably waiting on me to get home now. But I will just end with, again, echoing their sentiments. Thank you to everyone who attended this evening. Like I said, this is a part of functional democracy, and we're very thankful for you sharing your thoughts and asking questions. I want to say a special thank you to the mayor and the staff here and the city council for allowing us to have this time and to use these chambers. And certainly, last but not least, I would like to give a special thank you to Representative Walker Thomas, Representative Myron Dossett, and Senator Craig Richardson for taking time out of your busy schedules. Good luck. Drive safe as you're burning up the road as you continue to do that. And I'm sure you will get plenty of phone calls after this. So.
Cody, let me mention one real quick, since Elizabeth is sitting here. The Kentucky Chamber of Commerce every year has their legislative update, and it's coming up on November 10th. So I encourage any of y'all, if y'all can get to Lexington, catch a basketball game, or, well, I would say football, but catch a basketball game. We're losing? Okay, gotcha. But that is where you're going to hear from our leaders all the way down, from President Stivers to Speaker Osborne, and that's where you'll really hear a preview of next year's going on. So, thanks.
Thank you. Mayor, do you have any parting thoughts for us?
We plan on having them back after next session so we can talk to them more. And we thank everyone for coming out this evening. It is a great privilege to have you all here this evening. Thank you all, and drive safe.